This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. Our first guest is Senator Tom Cotton from Washington, D.C. Senator, we are happy to have you with us. Let's get straight to the first question that's on everybody's mind. Let's address the speculation that you may be considered for a position in the Trump administration. Can you tell me where that stands and what your interest level is?
Roby, it's been barely a week since Donald Trump was elected. He's going to make all these important decisions in due time, and I think we should all just give him the time that he needs to make the right decisions for his administration and for our country.
Well, is there a possibility, would you be interested, I'm just asking you personally, not whether or not he's offered you anything, but would you be interested in serving in the Trump administration if the right opportunity came along?
Roby, again, I think it's not helpful to speculate about all these things in public. We should just give the president-elect the time he needs to make the right choices for his administration and the country.
All right, I'm going to take that as not a no. How about that? So we'll move on. Lots of accolades for Reince Priebus as Chief of Staff. A lot of mixed reviews, if not condemnation, for Steve Bannon as the Chief Strategist in the White House. Do you have concerns about Steve Bannon being in the position that he's in the White House?
No, Roby, I don't. I haven't met Steve Bannon yet, but I know many people who know him well and speak very highly of him, like Mark Meadows, a congressman from North Carolina. I think it's a good thing to have more veterans at high levels of our government, and Mr. Bannon served in the Navy, so I look forward to getting to know him and working together with him. In the West Wing, it's most important that the president have advisors in whom he has confidence, and obviously after Mr. Bannon and Kellyanne Conway came onto the campaign in the final 3 months, they both developed a very close working relationship with the president-elect.
Let's talk about another issue here. In the presidential campaign, you made a lot of accusations about the Clinton Foundation. You called it corrupt, you called it a money laundering organization, and you warned that if Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton had become president, there would be some terrible conflicts of interest between the Clinton Foundation and a Clinton presidency. Some of those same potential conflicts of interest do exist for a Trump administration and the Trump business empire. Do you think that he ought to terminate his business interest, or how should he structure that with the potential conflicts of interest that could exist?
Roby, first let me address the Clinton Foundation. That was the central issue on Hillary Clinton's confirmation hearings in January of 2009. And regrettably, it would appear that while she was Secretary of State, she didn't uphold her commitments on the separation between the State Department and the Foundation. Reports last month suggested that the FBI has an investigation ongoing into those allegations. I think we have to let the law and the facts take us where they may lead us and wait for the FBI to reach their conclusions. On Donald Trump's business organizations, he has said he's going to put those organizations into a blind trust, won't have any active role in managing them, nor will he have knowledge of the ongoing operations of his business. And I think that's the appropriate and traditional path that most presidents or high-ranking officials in the government take.
I must have missed that. Did he announce that earlier today? Because previously he has said his children were going to run his business interest, and there was not a discussion of a blind trust.
Well, I believe he said for many months, Roby, to include on the campaign trail, that he would take a step back from all of his businesses, and they would be in a blind trust from which he would be excluded as both an active manager or with any knowledge of the operations. I'm sure the details with his children or other senior officers in the Trump organization are waiting to be worked out, but Donald Trump has said all along that he intends to take a step back from the Trump organization.
And if it doesn't go that way, will you be one of those folks calling for him to do that? Because the conflicts of interest could be potentially very serious.
Well, I take Donald Trump at his word that he's going to put the people's business at the forefront. He said that throughout the campaign, and I believe that's what he's going to do in the ordering of the affairs of the Trump organization in this transition period before he takes office on January 20th.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back for more with Senator Tom Cotton. What's on the agenda for the lame duck session and the new session starting in January? We're going to find out right after this. All right, we are back with Senator Tom Cotton from Washington, D.C. All right, Senator, let's talk first about what may happen in this lame duck session of Congress. There will potentially be some action on renewing sanctions against Iran. Do you think that will happen? What will that entail?
Yes, Roby, the Iran Sanctions Act expires at the end of this year. We need to extend that act. The House has already passed an extension. I believe the Senate will pass one before we adjourn for the rest of the year. Second, the government obviously will be funded into the new year. I expect that'll be a short-term funding bill that will allow the new administration to set some new priorities. And then third, in this lame duck session, Roby, as we often see, some smaller bills that are important but maybe don't get as many headlines will pass. My legislation, the Charles Duncan Buried with Honor Act, passed the Senate unanimously a couple months ago. That would allow indigent veterans in Arkansas to be buried in state cemeteries like we have in central Arkansas, like we have in east Arkansas, as opposed to just federal cemeteries that will allow their family members to be able to see them. Second, I'm working very closely with colleagues in the House on a bill that would help reform the Veterans Crisis Line. With more than 20 veterans taking their own lives every single day, we want to make sure that whenever they send a call or a text message, they get an immediate response, because there's no waiting time that's appropriate if a veteran is on the verge of taking his own life. Bills like that may not get the biggest headlines next to sanctions and government funding and Obamacare, but for those people they affect, they're very important. And those kind of bills usually get passed here in the final days of a Congress.
Let me pull us back to Iran. I agree with you on that, but let me pull this back to Iran. You said earlier this week that the president-elect could rip up that agreement with Iran, with other nations that have to agree with this, with the fact that money has already been exchanged. We might not have some of the leverage that we might need. Is that the most prudent way to renegotiate that Iran agreement, or should we do something a little bit more in terms of diplomacy or reworking that agreement through several nations?
Well, the president-elect has said that he wants to dismantle what he calls the disastrous Iran deal, and I agree with that position. Iran is already not keeping their obligations under the deal. Unfortunately, the deal was structured by President Obama in a way in which Iran did get a lot of benefit up front, yet they still have billions of dollars in currency stored overseas that would be subject to sanctions, and they still have many future trade deals that depend on the relaxation of sanctions. Of course, we should work with our partners who are equally threatened by Iran's nuclear programs, in addition to all of their aggression throughout the Middle East and against the United States interest and our allies' interests. But in the end, on an existential threat like a nuclear Iran, the United States has a lot of leverage: economic, financial, political, diplomatic, and military. And we have to use that leverage to keep our country safe from the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran.
I think this will wait for the new session of Congress to come in, but obviously there's been a lot of talk for years about repealing and replacing Obamacare. Certainly with Republican majorities now, that is, and a Republican White House, this will be something that could come to fruition. I've asked you before about the legislation to replace Obamacare. I don't think there's any doubt that there'll be a repeal of it. What will the replacement legislation look like? When can we expect to see that?
Well, as Donald Trump said last week, we want to repeal the legislation and have a replacement in its place to ensure that no one loses coverage, as happened when Obamacare went into effect. That'll likely be part of the new budget process next year, in the winter of next year, the January to April timeframe. There's still ongoing debates about exactly what that legislation will look like, but I think the general contours are well known. It will repeal a lot of the mandates of Obamacare. It'll grant some kind of tax credit or tax deduction treatment to all Americans, so we can ensure that all Americans have access to affordable care, and it will stop some of the most onerous penalties and taxes that Obamacare imposes on individuals and businesses. Because what we want ultimately is everyone to have access to affordable, quality care. That was the promise of Obamacare, to fix the problems that our healthcare system has, and unfortunately Obamacare has largely just made them worse.
All right, we got about 30 seconds, so I got to try one more time. If Donald Trump takes his time and eventually offers you a position in the Trump administration, would you be willing to serve your country in the Trump administration and leave your Senate seat?
Roby, I'm very happy to enjoy the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday and let Donald Trump take all the time he needs to make these important decisions. And in the meantime, I'm happy to be serving the people of Arkansas in the United States Senate.
Can I put you down as a maybe? I'll put you down as a maybe.
Put me down as wishing all your viewers. Put me down as wishing all your viewers a happy Thanksgiving.
All right. He is Senator Tom Cotton. As always, we appreciate you. Thank you for being with us.